Mercy, mercy, mercy. Nothing more fun about playing electric guitar than bending strings, let's face it. And that's what this lesson is all about. In blues guitar, it started to become part of the style with the earliest master of the electric guitar in blues, and that was T-Bone Walker. Now, T-Bone's style was really not built around radical string bends, but more subtle, kind of half-step bends. He would, he'd play a little... right? So he would sort of nudge the string, but he didn't really take it into the singing realm yet. That was left to his disciple, B.B. King, who about 10 years later really took it into the modern realm of electric blues guitar with whole step bends and vibrato. That's the thing for which he's really known, So all the familiar blues licks that everybody plays today were developed around the 1950s when guitar players started switching to lighter strings, playing louder amps, getting a little bit more sustain, and the guitar really became this vocal instrument that we're used to today. In the 60s, the guy that really set the standard was Albert King. What Albert would do is he would bend two whole steps. So he took T-Bone's half step and BB's whole step and combined them and came up with something, something more like... Now, we're not going to get into the specific styles of any of those players. We're not trying to emulate a particular player, but rather develop your technique so that you can use string bending to express yourself. Now, to test your ability to play in tune when you bend, what you want to do is start practicing what's called the pre-bend. And this is something like Hendrix used this really great effect. The idea was you would bend the string before you pick it, right? So when I go from G to A and pick it after it's bent. Now, how do I know that I'm on the right pitch before I pick it? Through practice and experience. I get to know my guitar and how much tension it takes to get that note up there. I can feel it, and when you can feel that just certain amount of tension, then you got it. Now, the key ingredient in any kind of a string bend is strength, and to have the endurance to be able to do it consistently. So instead of trying to bend with one finger, which some people do when you first start out, you got that one finger all by itself, and ain't gonna make it. You gotta use two fingers, or I prefer three whenever I can. So when I bend G up to A, I'm actually using all three fingers, 1, 2, 3, working together to push that note up. Okay, so here's an exercise for you that's kind of built around the idea of pre-bending and also mastering the subtleties of the whole step and the half step bend. So here's exercise number 1. And here's what I'm going to do is I'm starting way high up on the neck. I assume you're playing an electric guitar with a cutaway. If not, figure it out, okay? But the idea is this. I'm going to bend from G way up here and bend up a whole step. I'm going to bend that note and then release it. Then I'm going to move my hand down a half step, bend that note, and release it, then down a whole step, and so on. Now, before I continue the exercise, what I'm playing is what technically would be known as an A Dorian scale. That might be a little too technical, but it's an A minor scale, and in the key of A, it has an F sharp in it, a major sixth. And what that does is give it the typical sound that you usually hear when you hear a blues solo. It's like the blues scale plus the sixth. All right, so I bend, release, move down a fret, bend and release. Finally ended up with that bend on the second string. Now, everything I'm doing is on the second string. It all applies to the third string or the first string. It doesn't matter what string you're on. It's more the getting your ear and your fingers organized, all right? Now, going back the other way, the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to bend that note up and then slide my hand up to the next note, which is actually the same note that I just bent to. right? Now, the end result that you want to have is that it sounds like you just played that scale. But you played it by bending into each note, and the accuracy was the same as if you fretted it. That's the point of the exercise, is to be exactly on pitch with each note. Okay, now the same idea can be applied to the pentatonic scale. The pentatonic has some big gaps in it though, so it's a little challenging. And then, right, now notice what I'm doing. I'm bending that note up and I'm doing it by feel. The cool thing about bending is you can adjust it once you get it up there, but you got to be pretty close. So there's my step and a half, and then a step, another step, now a step and a half again, and then a whole step. Right? Now going back the other way, I'll do the same trick, which is to bend the note and then slide into the same note and continue up the scale. You get the idea, right? Now, I mentioned Albert King. To play Albert style on a standard guitar, you really got to put some muscle into it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cheat and move what notes he would play on the first string, move them over to the second string where it's a little easier. So here's the deal. Put your first finger on the second string, A, 10th fret, and then your third finger on C. Now, the reason for putting it on A is just to establish your key. Now, C is the note from which you're going to start, and you're going to use all three fingers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend up in half steps, and I'm going to try to match this with bends. Right? So I'm bending successively, never going back to pitch. It's always bending that string farther and farther in half step. Right? That's a challenge. But the idea is to be able to hit every note along the way, and then when you play real blues phrases, you can really be expressive because you can hear and feel every pitch along the way and kind of make an idea out of it that's less technical. Now, the same concept of these half-step bends can be applied to the arpeggio. The A dominant 7th chord has 4 notes in it. That's the notes that you tend to lean on when you phrase over an A7 chord and play blues lick. So when I bend, I can use my bends to make phrases out of the chord tones. There's the 7th, the 5th, the 3rd, and the root. Again, phrased on the second string. Here's what I'm going to do is bend from the 5th, that's E on the second string, way high up here, bend up that step and a half, right? Half steps down to the 5th. Then I'm going to put my finger on the major 3rd. Got to bend it up again a step and a half. And now the big one. I'm going to put my finger on the root, A, bend it up to the major 3rd. So what I'm doing is playing that arpeggio with the chromatic steps in between, all in half steps, using string bends. Woo! Have mercy, right? All right, now that I've got sort of that fundamental technique and my fingers have massive grooves in them and I'm all tired out, I can put that concept to work in a more musical setting, and that's to play 12-bar blues, slow blues like I played coming in. And I came up with a little solo here that kind of demonstrates each of these types of string bends, but in a less sort of exercisey way. The first 4 bars, the bends are all half steps. And so it doesn't sound like T-bone, but it's kind of building on the same kind of vocabulary as T-bone. The next 4 bars, the bends are whole steps. So I'm kind of taking it up a decade or so and working out of the B.B. song book. And then the final 4 bars, it's big, fat, wide bends, more like the Albert King sound. And again, kind of emulating that idea without trying to actually sound like him, all right? So I'm going to play this thing on the way out. I hope you had a good time. Check it out.